What's up, folks? I'm JC Owens. This is Rock My World Hall of Fame Unmasked Part 2. Now, last week we talked about the founders, some basics on alchemy, how it's used socially, as well as intel agency involvement in the industry at large, and some stuff like that. This week we're going to get into a little bit more on exactly how that's done and some places where you can see this stuff for yourself in their own words, actually. There is an exhibit that the Rock Hall of Fame itself does called Louder Than Words, Rock, Power, and Politics. You can actually see an article on it by a guy named Dan Coombs, where he talks a little bit about it. Um, and basically, like, rock and roll was chosen because they realized it has power to cross all kinds of boundaries. You can find rock and roll being played and listened to in Japan, in Saudi Arabia, in Russia, in Southeast Asia. I mean, you can even find Aboriginal tribes in Australia who have formed gangs around the identity associated with bands like Metallica and Anthrax, and it runs the gamut. It runs the gamut. They associate themselves with this music, and it has become a rallying cry for them to gather around. And this is just a tiny, tiny example of the power that rock music actually has. Really, all music, when it comes down to it, music is it's a super powerful medium. The only thing that really seems to trump it would be something like film or theater. Like when you can tell a story, like you can really get in people's heads. Um, Human beings seem to understand the world through stories. I know it helps me understand things. I know it like helps you know most people I know understand things. So, and historically that's been the case. You can find philosophers like Plato who talk about it specifically, and he talks about how the arts should be controlled very tightly because of their great effect on the youth, especially the youth. Um, and you can see it today. Like what a rock star says is almost 10 times more important than what a school teacher can say, or what a parent can even say in a lot of cases. And these idols, most of the time they have no idea that their influence is so powerful. By the time they find out, it's too late. They've already gotten in deep with contracts, and I've seen these contracts myself, or at least a couple of them anyway. I didn't sign them, thank God, but the things that you'll end up agreeing to, yeah. Like, you ever notice how the a band's first couple of albums seem to be pretty good, and then they kind of seem to fall off a little bit? Well, there's a couple of reasons behind that, I think, but one of the main reasons is that, like, that's about how long it takes for the studios and labels to start, slipping things in and demanding that you play this song, or you play that song, or you write songs about this, or you write songs about that. And the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame plays an integral part in all of this, right? Because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, in so many ways, tells society what is worth remembering, what music is valid, right? Like, they're the ones who decide what, what the definition of rock and roll is going to be. And some would argue that rock and roll is intrinsically political. And, to some degree, I think that's probably true. Most rock and roll is. It doesn't have to be, though. Rock and roll can just be fun. I believe it can be just fun, and, it doesn't have to be something that, degrades society and actually turns it into something bad. But, you know, all things that are good can be turned into something bad if they're taken to the extreme. And that's what these, modern record companies, the government, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the people behind it, that's what they want it to be. Though they want it to be degrading. They want it to promote drinking and rampant drug use and sex with every partner that you can think of, and they want to promote this degeneracy because it comes right back to that alchemy that we talked about last week, right? Well, remember what we talked about with the phoenix. With the phoenix, you need the phoenix has to burn to ashes, and then the new phoenix can rise from it, right? So that's kind of what they're doing to every society. They're using music as a tool, and you can see evidence of this going all the way back to the Cold War and before. It really began in earnest during World War II when Hollywood artists started signing up for the military and things like that. Even Elvis himself put on the uniform, and that right there was one of your confirmations. It's been right there in front of your face all along. Just go back through, just go back through all the famous people, the Laurel Canyon crew, like Jim Morrison and the Doors, and all these other '60s counterculture people. Look at all the punk artists. Miles Copeland III and Miles Copeland Jr. They talked about using a rock, label, a record label, to push political ideas and the ideas of the MI6 and CIA. Right shortly thereafter, IRS gets founded, and then they sign the Pistols and Smiths and all these other punk bands. Music allows them to convince the youth to rebel and burn it all down for them. Once the youth burn it all down for them, then they can come in and reprogram everything as they see fit. We wonder how, so many of our children have lost their way and have, gotten confused about life and, what's what. Well, this is how. This is how it's been spread. And, like I said, even in their own exhibit, this louder than words exhibit, they have Bill Clinton's saxophone, which I'm sure he gave that to Greg Harris, who is, you see, the Rock Hall of Fame is ran by a couple of different people. One being Greg Harris, who is the liberal of the two. The other being Chris Kelly, who is the Republican, right? They always give you the two sides, folks. Right and left, fire and ice. Just like, it's like I told you in that community post. Just like fire and water are used to drive a steam engine, right versus left, feminism versus MGTOW, East versus West, communism versus capitalism, these extreme versus matches are what drive their agendas forward. They can use the tension created by these two different sides interacting with one another to push the whole machine forward. And, that is, in a nutshell, how the whole machine runs. And without that, it could not. But either way, I'm sure that, Greg Harris was given the saxophone by Bill himself. They are close friends, just like Chris Kelly is close friends with a lot of the Republicans over at the RNC. He even was a co-chair of the RNC in Cleveland in 2016. Such a pivotal year, right? And then how does he wind up as, part of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Well, it couldn't have anything to do with his government connections, now could it? Right? You go to Greg Harris. He was he was like over the Baseball Hall of Fame forever, and he's worked with the state government in Ohio. Like you just see it over and over again, where the music industry and the government just have this revolving door, much like Big Pharma and so many of the other huge industries that run our country and the Western world. You know, it's a big club and you ain't in it, folks. It's a big club and you ain't in it. And if we're ever going to, I guess, shuck the yoke of this little club, then we're going to have to start being honest with ourselves about, the ways that they manipulate us. Anyway, that's probably about it for today. I hope you folks have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you later. Peace.